My name is Simone Jacobs. I'm a clinical social worker and the group practice owner of Tacoma Therapy. So I have about 6 clinicians that are working with me and an intern, and I'm also a recent author of a book called The Paradox of Surviving Childhood Trauma, which sort of gets into my specialty, which is working with survivors of childhood abuse and neglect. So although I say it's PTSD, most of the PTSD that I work with is from childhood experiences rather than sort of wartime or vets, things like that. Although that they do come in too, because once you can sort of work with people who've been seriously traumatized as children, the same kinds of symptoms, the same kinds of issues come up regardless of the cause of the PTSD. So the book actually is talking about how we kind of use that symptoms aren't actually the problem. The symptoms are actually the solution to the bigger problem, which is trauma. So working with people who have been seriously traumatized, we see PTSD, we see depression, anxiety, dissociation, all kinds of sort of symptoms, but they're the solution to managing a much bigger problem, which is particularly when the people I'm working with in terms of children surviving their childhoods. So in the way that we work with people, it's more about understanding that suicide is actually a solution when you don't have any options. So it's kind of like saying, if I can die, then I can live another day. So when you're a kid and you can't escape and there's no way out, you need some kind of escape. So you go in your head and so suicide becomes that option, that if I can escape in this way, then I can choose to live. So, but then as you get older, what happens is suicide then becomes the solution to many problems, or feeling suicidal becomes the solution to many problems. And so then we're working from a clinician perspective, we say, well, the suicide is the problem. But if we can work from understanding that suicide was the solution, then we can work more effectively with our clients. So we're not sort of running to put them into the hospital, we're not running to sort of over-medicate or try to fix this, but actually to work with people to understand the meaning of suicide rather than sort of fix suicide as being the problem. I think a lot of people, especially when they see the sort of title of the book, that they think, oh, this is about working with children, and it's not. In fact, we've been to a conference one time and they were like, this is under the children's section. We're like, no. But it's sort of helping people. When we take this other perspective, we really help people to kind of take the pressure off the situation. It takes the pressure off the clinician to try to fix the problem, and it takes the pressure off the client because they've made meaning of their experiences. But the meaning that they made was when they were 5 years old. So, but they don't understand that. So they've come up with rules and belief systems that govern their life as adults because they lived in these war zones as children. So when we work with people in terms of sort of looking at that and recognizing you have, I think, kind of what you said, like it's a normal reaction to a very abnormal experience. And other people who've been through that are also reacting in the same ways. So while they might be, the person sitting in front of me might be the person that's actually, in hospital, getting treatment, all of those things. So they feel like, well, I'm the crazy one. And often I'll say, actually, you might be the sanest person in your family because you're actually dealing with the issues and you're wanting to find a solution and to be differently in the world. So we kind of just, I guess, what do we do? When somebody comes in and says that I'm suicidal, then we'll say something along the lines of, what is suicide rescuing you from? And if we can break it down and we can really sort of help people to connect, then what we find is that it's a solution to, say, I've been hurt in some way. It's a solution to, I feel really betrayed about a situation. It's a solution to, I've been wounded basically in some way. And if we can then work with those feelings, those issues, then we don't have to have suicide as the solution. We kind of just wanted to write a very clinical book. So we're not researchers, we're not, academics. And when we first started talking about the book with other clinicians, particularly people who've done a lot of writing, they said, just stick to what you know. And so while we did initially start defining PTSD and, you know, going into detail about sort of our clinical and theoretical backgrounds, what we found was at the end that we just needed to write about what we knew, which was sitting in the room with clients and talking about those experiences. So for many, part of I think what's unique about the background, because I wrote it with two other women, is that we worked both inpatient and outpatient. So we've worked on a unit for post-traumatic stress disorder, so people would come in from actually all around the country. And working in very short-term ways to deal with crisis management, to deal with acute suicidality, to deal with a sort of serious deterioration in functioning. And then I also worked, and they did too, in the same program but on the outpatient side, which is working with people 6 hours a day. They were in groups working on the long-term issues of really getting into sort of working through these traumatic experiences. So our book is it's a gift back to the clinicians who were so good at what they did, who really brought themselves into the room, who really cared about the clients that they worked with and got into it. I saw growth. So my background is actually as a psychiatric nurse, and I'd kind of given up on it. I ended up at the Center for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder because I went back to school and did social work, and my first year internship was with these people, and I'd never seen anything like it in all my experiences of working with mental health. Like, people who were really in the work, and I saw clients really getting better. And they weren't chastised for their self-harm, they weren't broken down in any way, they were supported. I often talk about this one, the first time a client came in who was suicidal, or at the end of the day, and instead of sort of, you know, what are we doing, you need to go into the hospital, they said, can you be safe for the weekend? And the client said, yeah, I think I can. And, you know, they went through a couple of things that she could do to kind of care for herself. And I spent the weekend kind of anxious. I was like, how do you know that the client's telling the truth? And they said, no, she'll be here on Monday. She will be here on Monday. And she was there on Monday morning. And she'd seriously self-harmed. But the first question that they asked her wasn't, you know, what did you do? Why did you do it? They said, did it get to what you wanted it to get to? And the client said, almost. And from there, they could actually have a discussion about what the issues were, what was she trying to get to. Instead of just focusing on the symptom of self-harm, they actually got to talk about the issues that had been troubling her and what had come up. And so, you know, we talk about very intense things, and something had activated her system, on Friday, but she'd managed. It wasn't necessarily a pretty way of managing, but she managed, and she got through, and she didn't kill herself. And over the time that she was in treatment, the self-harm very much decreased because she was able to talk about the meaning that was connected to it. And so that's what we do. We spend a lot of time talking about the meaning, because all of our behaviors have meaning. So we come from a very kind of psychodynamic attachment kind of perspective, but that's how we sort of do it, isn't it? You wouldn't be the person that you are today if these things hadn't happened to you. So let's understand why you do what you do.